So it seems that we are going live now.
Yep.
So let's just wait that the community joins, and we are live. Welcoming to everybody, the Scaleup Valley community. Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast. This is the podcast where we host the best tech leaders across the world, the ones who are scaling businesses from 1 million to 100 million in revenues, and kind of reminding the numbers. There is only 4% of all businesses who surpass the 1 million in revenues, 0.4% the 10 million, and 0.04% the 100 million, and which shows how difficult it is. And on top of that, in a venture-backed business, you need to do this in 5 to 7 or 7 to 10 years in terms of world-class standards. And yeah, that's an explosive combination of stress, excitement, ambition. And today with us, we have the pleasure of hosting Igor Volzhanin, the CEO of Data Sine. Igor, thank you so much for joining us. Really a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Mike. It's great to be here, and hello, everybody.
That's perfect. And yeah, let's start by getting to know a little bit more about yourself. So what were you doing before starting Data Sine, and then just do the bridge with why Data Sine and how the idea came.
Sure. So my background is, so I was born in Ukraine, grew up in Canada, and once I graduated from the university there, I did a master's in public administration. I worked for 5 years in international development, and that took me all over the world. So I lived in Germany, India, US, and I realized at one point that I really didn't enjoy doing that. I didn't enjoy the international development, consulting, that whole industry just wasn't for me. Although on paper it sounded fantastic. And the other thing I realized is that I didn't really want to work for anybody. I didn't really want to ever kind of go back and have a boss in a conventional sense. Right. And so I thought, yeah, kind of. And so I thought, well, what can I do? What is it that I want to do? And I realized the one thing that I've always enjoyed reading and studying on my own outside of school or any kind of education was psychology. And so I applied to a university here in London to do a PhD in psychology. And I actually found a professor. I spoke to her and then kind of applied and got in. And so I moved to London just about 5 years ago to do a PhD in psychology. And once I started that, I always had this desire to create a business. I wasn't sure what exactly I would do my business in, but I knew that that's probably what I would want to do. And so I started talking to random people. I just started talking to people and telling them, I want to start a company, I want to do something, and eventually met another person who also said, well, I also been thinking I'm quitting my job at a bank, and I'm also thinking about starting a company. Why don't we do something together? And so that's how Data Sine as a company was born. Initially we thought he had some connections in the bank, so we went and pitched this idea of using AI and psychology together to a bank, and the bank in question said, yeah, this is amazing. You guys should start a company. And so we spent a week creating the name, and then 2 weeks putting together some sort of a demo, presentation. And then when we came back 3 weeks later, the guy said, oh, sorry, we already moved on. There's other priorities at a bank.
Oh,
and then that's when we realized that this is going to be harder than we thought.
Right.
And so that's how it started.
And by the way, so you are two founders, and
so today there are 4 of us. So the original founder has actually left. So I have 3 co-founders that we run the company with.
Got it. And initially, when you were doing this first demo, what was the background of another co-founder?
So his background was in banking. and
but
he had
not
worked.
tech. So you didn't
No.
have any tech
So
background.
neither one of us had a tech background.
That was the point that I was trying to get.
And what ended up happening is we were, as I call it, the phase of we were looking for a CTO for like a year and a half. And while looking for a CTO, we realized that actually we just have to start kind of building the product. The PhD in psychology, there's quite a bit of programming that ends up happening that you learn. And so based on kind of some of the languages that I was learning during the PhD, I moved to Python. We decided to use Python for pretty much everything for development. So I had to create the first algorithm myself, and the first code was written by me. And that's just kind of to get the ball rolling. And then we had other people who joined the company later on to help us.
Got it. Sounds perfect. And yeah, it would be great getting your story, which is quite amazing and inspiring, to get to know a little bit more about Data Sine. So what is the kind of the elevator pitch? What Data Sine does?
Sure. So what we do is we help businesses better communicate with their customers. And what that means is we look at all your historic sendouts, so all the engagements that a business has generated with customers. So Facebook ads, emails that they've sent out, and then we look at the engagement, so click rates, open rates of that different content. We analyze the actual messages that are sent out. We look at how engaging they are, and we provide a platform for marketers, CRM managers to actually make the next message better. And so we actually provide them inline recommendations. So replace this image with this image because it will perform better. This sentence is too long, make another sentence. Replace this word with another word. And so our company, we really specialize on content itself more than anything.
Got it. Sounds amazing. And in terms of, just give us a little bit an overview about the stage of the company. So in terms of ad count, what is the size of the company?
So we raised our Series A in January of this year. That was about a £4 million round. We are now 21 or 22 people, and we have about 7 or 8 large enterprise customers, and then we've just about to launch a SaaS version of our platform. We already have maybe 150 to 300 users on that, beta testing it or alpha testing it, and then we'll be launching a beta version of that shortly.
Got it. And in that sense, is this a movement from enterprise to SMB and serving both segments, or is it a pivot to focus more your efforts on SMB?
So what it is a move, and this has been a gradual move for us as the company has evolved. It's really a move from kind of bespoke consulting-like projects to more of a standardized SaaS solution. And what we realized about a year ago is that actually what we're building can be eventually made into a single SaaS platform that everybody can integrate with, and we can actually use the data of any business and build out those integrations and plugins with other platforms like MailChimp or Facebook, which then means everybody can be serviced kind of on the SaaS level. And so that's where the focus has been shifting. That being said, we engage a lot with enterprises, and our biggest customers are still enterprises. But eventually we plan on over the next 2 years to have a fully online platform for them as well.
Got it. So which means that you will keep serving both segments, but this is much more an effort to go from a bespoke, as you said, model or a service-based model to a product-based model, having the product as the main core of the business model of the company.
That's right. So you've put it quite well.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. And so let me just also plug in again our audience. As we know, we always discuss the Rockefeller habits in every single show, just giving context to the ones who are listening for the first time. So the Rockefeller habits were kind of certain fundamentals, rules, habits invented or put it together by John Rockefeller, one of the most successful businessmen in the history of the United States. Yesterday was the Independence Day, so it's good to talk about the US. And he believes that these were some of the habits that made him so successful. We will not cover the 10 habits, but we will try to plug in our conversation some of those habits. And starting with a topic that everyone now talks about, which is the OKRs. So, and the relationship with the Rockefeller habits are the Rockefeller habit number 2. It's about how do we ensure that all the team is focused in just one single priority for the quarter. So everyone is focused from marketing to product to sales to engineering to customer success. And this is about defining the OKRs for the company and then cascading it to or doing the exercise bottom up. I prefer the expression to serve the company or how we can influence the results of the company. So how is your process about putting together what would be your main strategic goals or focus or OKRs for the next quarter? Are you doing it by quarter or by year? So how does it work in your context?
Yeah, so we actually had just gone through this exercise. What we decided to do is to create a so-called Northstar KPI. So what is the one KPI that would make us great in the next, so first we looked at the problem that we're trying to solve as a company right now. So where are we and what do we need to achieve? And we realized that actually the main challenge that we have at the moment is achieving the product market fit and then scaling. So what is product market fit? And we tried to break that down, and we thought, what would be the one KPI that would indicate to us that we've actually achieved it? And it took a while, and we looked at other companies, how they define it. So whether it's Facebook that looks at number of minutes or hours you spend on Facebook, or Amazon number of products that you buy. For us, it was the amount of value that we generate for our customers. So so that's the one KPI that we thought, if we can maximize the amount of value that we generate, then we're succeeding. And so how do you define value? And it came down to kind of 4 parameters. So it came down to the number of customers that we have. So obviously, the more customers that we have, the more value we're able to generate. The second is, how effective is our solution to them? So how much time is it saving? Or in our case, what kind of uplift are our customers achieving? And so the more uplift that they're seeing by using us, the more value that we're generating. And then we looked at kind of how much do they spend on us, and how much do they spend on the platforms that we are integrating with. And so obviously, the more our customers are spending, the more uplift they're getting, the more of them there are, the more value we're generating. And so we looked at kind of across the board, and those were the main KPIs. And then we said, okay, who is responsible for what? Which part of the business can drive which of these? What we then realized is actually multiple units would be responsible for driving all of them. So it can't be the job of sales to get more customers and that's it, right? It just doesn't work. And that was actually quite helpful, because then it builds a framework where multiple departments are aligned towards a single goal, realizing that, okay, it's not just about number of customers generated by sales or number of customers generated by marketing. It's also, how can product help in getting more customers by building more features? And so same thing with effectiveness. So yes, you can say it's a data science problem of getting the algorithms to be more effective. But actually, if the sales or marketing teams are not getting the right customers that are not able to take advantage of the platform, then the value you're generating is also not there. And so actually, it's the job of sales and marketing to qualify and make sure that we're getting the right clients who can then actually be helped by the product. And so that's the exercise we went through. We had this kind of Northstar KPI, which is the total value generated. We broke it down into several kind of sub KPIs, assigned those to different departments, and then we report on them every week. So every Friday evening, each manager of a department goes in and enters their numbers. So this is actually the second week that we'll be doing that. and then that helps us
And
align.
it's all company or just managers or ads? How does it work?
So the Northstar KPI was presented to everybody. As we're finishing it, we part of that was actually creating definitions for them. So for example, what is a customer, right? Is it a paying customer? Should they be paying a certain amount? If they become no longer a customer, when do they go from active to inactive? How many actions should they be doing on the platform every month for them to be considered active or inactive? And so we defined that across the whole company to make sure that everybody's clear what an active customer is, what is an active customer, and then it's up to the managers to report on the actual KPIs every week.
Got it. Sounds great. And we were getting, of course, to the part and coming back to the OKRs. So are you defining it or reviewing it, revising it every quarter, or you keep this North Star for the midterm?
So the way we did this, our North Star is reflective of the phase that we're in. So at the moment, it's important for us to feel that we're achieving the phase, the product market fit. Ultimately, that's the main thing. So as we start to feel that we're achieving that, then it becomes, okay, well, what is the next problem that the company is facing? And I would imagine that would be growth. So let's say all of a sudden it becomes important to understand how quickly can we grow? And so we would probably do the same exercise again, because the KPI, the Northstar KPI, the Northstar would change because the problem has changed. And so we would go through the same exercise again.
Got it. And yes, and you started already explaining a little bit how do you track, how do you make decisions, and what are the meeting rhythms, which is the Rockefeller habit number 3, having really in place those meeting rhythms that help you to keep tracking and learning as quicker as possible and making decisions and acting on the feedback that you are seeing as a company, as a team. And of course, it becomes much more complex when we have 50, 100, 200, 300 people. So that's why it's so important to start those habits very early on in the company, because sometimes we think that going from 2 founders to 10 it's a lot of complexity that increases in the company. And usually we say, oh, this is the kind of thing that we should only do when we are 50 or 100. And usually it's too late, because it's about having habits, it's about us being part of the culture, and that's very interesting, this point. So you were saying, how do you track the progress? You have a Friday evening meeting where you communicate the North Star metric, and then you have the managers kind of reporting on the main KPIs that fit that North Star metric.
So the way it works is we have a Friday evening kind of catch up, I guess, where everybody enters their KPIs and reports on them. We then have a monthly strategy meeting where we actually go through our roadmap, our product roadmap, all the milestones that are coming up, the different teams give updates, and then we look at what are the priorities for the month, in keeping in mind how do we achieve the North Star that we're trying to achieve. And then we have a kind of a quicker update meeting halfway through the month to see how have we performed against the objectives that we set ourselves. Are we on target? Is each department on target to meet those objectives? Or does somebody need help? Or will something kind of not be done this month? And then the process repeats itself again the following month, when we sit down and review the progress for the previous month, set out new objectives for the month, and then kind of go from there. Then we also have management meetings. At the moment, they're happening pretty much once a week now, when everybody sits down, and then that's more of operational type of things. So everything from Christmas holidays to where we are as a company, what's the next features we need to build, and so on.
Sounds perfect. And yeah, also let's come to the Rockefeller habit number 1. As we promised to the audience, we will only discuss this 3 habits of the 10. But I think that you should all go there and evaluate yourselves towards, and your teams towards the habits themselves, which is about how do you ensure that we have a healthy and aligned team. So here it would be much more interesting for the audience, and also I assume for me, to see how you started building the puzzle of the leadership team, or evolving a little bit in this case. I think that's the stage we are in, evolving from the founding team to the leadership team. And so what were the positions? You said that you started with 2 people with business background, on your case with a PhD in psychology, and then you added another 2 founders, and the initial co-founder then left. So just guide us through the different changes in terms of evolving in the founding team, and then evolving to have, let's say, the first leadership team that you are building now.
Sure. So indeed, we started with 2 people, and then we brought in the so-called 3 Fs, the friends, family, and fools, into the company. And initially, it was very much kind of my friends and then the family members, as kind of very early employees. And about a year and a half into it, as we entered Techstars, or actually kind of as we exited Techstars, the leadership team changed quite a bit. And so the original co-founder left, and then at that point we had Chris, who joined us as the CTO, and then James, who joined as a data scientist, and kind of that became the core team of Data Sine, and kind of the core founding team at that point. And so, I was more responsible for the business development side of things, and then Chris and James took over the more of the tech side. And then the next iteration of the leadership team probably happened, I want to say about a year and a half later, as we started. So when we closed our seed round, essentially, that was the first time when we, let me think. Yeah, so right between the seed round, as we were going the seed round, we started looking for more people to join the company, but the leadership team remained pretty much the 3 of us. And it was at Series A when we started looking for more senior talent. And that's when we brought in a marketing director, a sales director, and then we also promoted one of the earliest employee that we had, Jorgen, kind of also to the strategy level. And that's now where the team is. Now we also have a product manager now who is on that level. And that's what the senior team has essentially become in the company. It's so product, tech, data science, R&D, strategy, sales, marketing, and myself. And that's where the team is at today.
Got it. And in terms of moving to Series B, and we will go through one of the topics that is always interesting, which are the lessons on the fundraising process until now. So what do you think would be the next iteration until you get to Series B? Or let me put you in a more comfortable position to not give any message inside. So what do you think is the next piece that might be missing in the puzzle?
So that's a good question. And I think at the moment we have the structure in place. And I think given that we're a very flat organization still, I don't even think it's necessarily fair to kind of divide people into the senior team and junior team and so on, because it is still at the moment a very flat organization. I think as we grow and there becomes more and more layers to it, we are going to start seeing kind of other areas that need to be taken over, whether that's finance and accounting being separated or operational things is separated. That remains to be seen. But I think in terms of being able to kind of scale, I think we're in a very good position right now. Given that the company is 22, will grow to 24 people. That layer, the management layer, is already 7. That gives us quite a bit of growth still to be had before we have to think about scaling. And to be honest, my answer is probably quite biased towards the fact that I don't really know because I hadn't gone through this yet. Right. I can talk about what it's like to build a company up to Series A, but I can't necessarily tell you yet what it's like to build a company at Series B.
I don't know what is the source, but the ideal team size, I think that something is also related with the PISA rule. It should be 5 to 7. So which means that if you have that 7 leaders in place, you can grow to 35 if you have teams of 5, or to 49 if you have teams of 7. And of course, this is not linear because there are teams that have less people and teams that have more people. So there are usually teams that are a little bit more stretched and need to have a middle management layer or a management layer earlier than in other areas that maybe will not even need a management layer. Example, finance. Does it make sense to have a too complex financial organization inside, or to subcontract parts of the process? So yeah, and let's get to very good questions and very good answers. Sorry, and let's get to one of the final chapters or segments of the show, which is really what were the main lessons. Let's start by raising your seed round. So going through this pre-seed, the accelerator program, getting to the seed round, friends, family, and fools. So how was that? How long did you start? What we didn't ask this in the beginning. So when was the company founded?
So we were founded in February of 2015.
Got it.
We entered Techstars, and so that was our first investment in June of 2016. So just about a month or a year and a bit. And we raised this, and we closed our seed round in October of 2017. And then we closed our Series A round in January of 2019. Lessons learned. I think the main one, so seed round was by far the hardest round to raise so far. And I thought a lot about this. So I sometimes, not anymore, not lately, but I used to look at the Trello board that I kept during that with all the meetings that I'm having and kind of the whole pipeline. And I had close to 150 meetings during the seed round, and it was extremely tiring. And I've spoken to investors from Russia all the way down to Silicon Valley, so every country, essentially every country in Europe, and beyond. So it was a very hard round to raise, and we ended up raising about €1 million during it. The lessons learned is that your seed round is going to be painful, or at least ours was, and it will take a long time. And even though the Series A took maybe slightly less time, in real kind of months, it probably took the same 6 months. So maybe seed round took like 8 months. But it was the process, because I was already familiar with the process.
That when you start engaging with investors, actively looking for investment, or already starting networking before even thinking about that?
So let's talk about So if we're talking about seed round, so when Techstars ended, which was September of 2016, so we have a big demo day, basically kind of October 1st. We weren't officially looking for money. So we kept saying, no, we were not fundraising. We might next year, towards Q2 of next year, and so on. But of course, you have these meetings, you have follow-up meetings. And so even though you're not officially fundraising, you in effect you're just pretending
keep the
not
doors
to.
Open.
Yes. So we really kind of kicked that off in January. And we closed in October. So, and we had an exceptionally difficult round. We had an investor who pulled out, and we had, we got to the actual term sheet quite early. It was April, so 4 months to get to a term sheet. But to actually close and find the rest of the money, it took a lot of time, because essentially at that point, you don't have metrics. You just don't. It becomes an exercise in finding somebody who believes in you and convincing them, and that is just hard. That is difficult to do on a good day, and it's very, very hard to do if you have no previous experience, you have no previous traction. But it doesn't mean that it can't be done. It can be done, and it really comes down to perseverance and just keep doing it. over and over and over again. And so having 150 meetings, maybe that's on the high side, maybe not, but everybody I spoke to and our entire Techstars cohort also experienced very similar things. So it's just a tough round to do. Series A was quite different. We started in middle of June of last year, and we had a term sheet in August. So very, very quick. We had a lot of interest. We were actually oversubscribed. It still took a while to close, just getting the legals and everything else. So it still took 6 months, but it was a very different journey and a very different experience. Again, different because at that stage you already have something, you have the metrics, and so it becomes an exercise, and you already have the connections. So the exercise becomes in presenting the company well, showing the growth, showing where you're going next, showing that you can get to that $100 million company in revenue eventually, and showing the path to that. And I suspect Series B will be, again, a very different experience. And whether or not it will be hard or easy, I don't know. But again, it will be an exercise not just in showing how you can get to 100 million eventually, but actually having a credible path, and showing the economics of your business and where you're at, how you're acquiring customers, how much does it cost, and really, can I have now, 20 million or 50 million or whatever, however much you need to get you to the next level, then that gets you to the next level. And that's just how it is. It starts hard, and then as you get more experience, as you get more connections, as people trust you, get more investors as well. I think the one lesson I learned from our seed round that might be helpful to your listeners and viewers is that we actually went the VC route right away. So for our seed round, we weren't looking for any angel investors. We went straight looking for VCs or micro VCs or corporate VCs or anything like that. And so we had two very good investors early on, two VCs. And when it came time to raise Series A, they both said, look, we want to follow on. And so the conversation with the Series A investor was already, look, I already have half the round committed. And would you like to come in? Yeah, and so that's a completely different conversations from I'm starting from scratch, and please give me some money to help build this company.
Absolutely. And what do you anticipate? So there is this famous SaaS napkin put together by Christoph Jens, one of the partners of or founders of Point Nine Capital, the VC based in Berlin, that says that we need to be able, in order to raise a Series A, to get around 1 million ARR, and Series B 5 million ARR. So, but of course it depends always. This is really a SaaS napkin, some benchmarks. It depends a lot on the story, on the specifics of the business model, on the strategy, on the founders, on the investors themselves. So, what do you think are, of course, can be some of the milestones that you need to prove on a potential Series B?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with Series A. So I have definitely heard this. My view on the million ARR is that any VC that says we need to see 1 million ARR before we invest in you is not a Series A investor. That is not a Series A. Just looking at where the company is at that moment in time, they can be very different. And I was looking at this just the other day. It still to this day, about 40% of all companies that raise Series A raise with no revenue. And when I was speaking to our investors,
so 40% of all companies who raised Series A didn't have 1 million in ARR.
No, not at all, not at all, and we didn't, and I don't think you need to. I think it depends. So I think if you're talking about a SaaS business that is B2C, maybe that's what you need. But on the enterprise side of things, I mean, one contract for us could be that entire amount.
Exactly.
And a single contract is not going to tell anything to the investor, right? Oh, good, you were able to close one bank, and
it's
and you
not
got
predictable. Yeah.
So it differs a lot. And I think for B2B companies, especially the ones that have long sales cycles, the investors I spoke to have indicated that we were at that stage, even though we didn't have the 1 million, because we had done pilots, we showed traction, we showed a healthy pipeline. We showed, the ability to have follow-on contracts and projects with existing customers, and that was that. For them, it was a Series A stage company. I think so that's kind of that point, because a lot of people get hung up on this 1 million. My personal view is, and I said this right from the beginning, any VC I go in and they say we need to see 1 million, that's it. That's a deal breaker, because they're not thinking about the founders, they're not thinking about the company. They have these checklists. That's not how you should be investing, in my view, at that level. At Series B, things change. I think at that point you should be able to show growth. Less so again in terms of your actual numbers, and maybe for a SaaS B2B, B2C startup, you do need to have that 5 million. But you need to start showing growth. You need to show growth in terms of, so you need to have enterprise level contracts. You should ideally be showing that contract size is growing, unless you have an annual contract, but kind of you're able to secure at least an annual contract with recurring revenue. And ideally you show that it's growing month to month or year to year. You have multiple clients. I would say if you were serving banks, it should be maybe five contracts that are signed and that are delivering monthly recurring revenue. And then you kind of go from there. And it's really, I think, important to show how you're going to convert those 5 into 500 eventually. What is it that you need? And so it becomes also important to understand your customer acquisition costs, and you need to know what channels work and don't work. So ideally, so that's what we're doing right now. We're testing a lot, trying to figure out, do we sell through marketing? Is it PPC? Should it be direct calls? Which industries are buying us? And ideally, you will have done all of those tests, so that you can say, look, what we found based on our experience works is conferences, for example. And so next year we need 10 million to go to these 100 conferences. And for each conference, we're going to close 2 leads, because that's what we've been doing in the last 6 months. And that's how we're going to get to that next stage. It just becomes a different game. It becomes about showing that you can scale, and then that's what you're raising the money for. And
finding a channel that can move you to the next milestone, and then it's about finding additional channels or leveraging.
That's right. I mean, there's only so many conferences in our example, right? So then it becomes, okay, I can't go to any more conferences, or I can't sponsor anymore. What else? Ideally, eventually, as one of our investors pointed out the other day, 50% of your traffic becomes organic, and that means referrals. That means your customers are sticky, low churn rate, and then you're kind of off to grow and scale up to that. So I do believe that the game changes at each round, and so now it's all about those metrics. For a company to close a Series B.
And what do you think, and final question around this topic, what do you think is the pressure in terms of growth? Because there are a lot of companies who feel, so we all feel a lot of pressure as founders to get those benchmarks. And sometimes I think that we even ask more than what is needed from ourselves. But there is this kind of expectation that we need to be growing 3x or at least 2.5x to really be investable, or at least interesting to choose, or even to choose the investors that we really want, not the ones who are available to invest at the current metrics. What is your perception on that? Because I enjoyed, and I had some interactions with you so far, and you can be very direct, and this is something that I really enjoy, and that's why I'm asking this question.
So what is the question?
So good point, you see. The question is, do you really feel that you need to kind of be able to get the 3x, 2.5x to be on a momentum to raise Series B? Or there are other factors, as you were explaining, that might be important as well. So it doesn't need to be a window of 18 months to get to Series B. Sometimes there is this rule of 18 months, so which means that after 9 or 12 months, you raise the last round, you need to start working on the next one. And of course, you need to have metrics to start working on that round.
So do I think that you need to get a 3x growth, whatever that
Correct.
means? No, I mean, the reason it's hard to operate in these numbers, right? Because what is 3x? So I have 3 customers and then I have 3 more and you know, or 3 times more. So now I have 9. Does that mean so obviously there's a huge variety. I think your point, the more interesting point here is you mentioned about investors that are available versus the ones you want. And I think a lot of problems that we run into, both as founders and human beings, is that we set these strange expectations for ourselves. So I want Andreessen Horowitz to invest in me, and in order to get them, I have to go 3x. And so the gravity doesn't apply to me anymore all of a sudden, or it can't in my case. But I have to achieve this. And then when you raise money from somebody else, all of a sudden you're considered to be, you know, less than successful because you set that for yourself. And so I think, yes, if there's an investor that you really want, I think you need to check why you want them. What is the reason you want that particular investor? Because chances are their money weighs exactly the same as anybody else. Maybe they can open some doors or something like that. I don't know. But in general, you know, investors are quite similar. And so why, right? And if there's no good reason, then instead of focusing on the 3x growth, build something that you're passionate about, and let it grow, right? Let it grow in a natural way that you're comfortable with and that the world allows you to do. There's no point in burning more money. And I know some companies do this where they will throw a lot of money at marketing just to achieve that 3x growth, just to go and raise that round. And then you raise all that money and you realize that channel doesn't work. Yes, it worked when you burned 100K in a month through it, but it doesn't actually work in the long run. So what have you done? So to me, and this is what we're trying to do here, is build a company that is exciting, that people like working, that is really delivering something of value to customers, in the hopes that the customers that we're serving and the feedback that we're getting is useful, and people are using it and they're enjoying it. And then whether it ends up being a 3x growth, a 2x growth, 100% growth, whatever that is, that would be my job then to make sure that we have the appropriate and the right investors to support us on the journey that we're going on.
Got it. Again, love your answer and super specific straight to the point. So we are coming to the end of the show. Just to quickly recap, we went through one of the main formulas of scaling up, which is to assure that we have the right people on the right seats. We discussed the structure of the team, focused on the right priorities. We discussed how to define the OKRs, executing those at the right pace. We discussed the meeting rhythms, and of course with appropriate cash flow to get to the next milestone. And that's why we are discussing cash and fundraising and what are the right investors to go with you in that journey. And in summary, we covered 3 of the 10 Rockefeller habits and the amazing experience of Igor, CEO at Data Sine. And final question that we always ask in the show, which is, if you would have the opportunity to get back, let me see my notes, to February 2015, and you would have the opportunity to catch up with your younger self, what would you tell him, or what would be your one single piece of advice that you give to the Igor Volzhanin February 2015?
I would say that it will take longer than everything will take longer than expected, and I would tell them to hang in there. That it does, for the most part, work out as it should. It's not always the way you want, but it works out as it should. And so, but it will take time. Patience. I think get more patience. It's one of the hardest things that I still struggle with. I want everything and now. And learn to be patient, I think is the number one lesson that I would try to impart.
That's awesome. So Igor, thank you so much for joining us and for the commitment, the time, the preparation, everything to share your journey with our listeners. You are always invited to come back to the show. We love to have our guests coming in different moments of the scale-up process, and we expect to have you soon to tell us how did you get to Series B and to Series C and to IPO or even later. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you so much for organizing this and for all your time and for the great questions. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and closing the show, thank you so much also for you for being on that side, being live or later, getting to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Facebook, YouTube. We try to have it available in all channels possible, so you can use the channel that works best to you. This is the show where we interview the best tech leaders around how they are scaling up their businesses from scratch to 100 million, which is our obsession, as faster as possible. And yeah, see you soon. As you know, you have different episodes, these CEO one-on-one interviews, also product panels, engineering panels, sales panels, with companies from San Francisco, New York, London, Berlin, Paris, Singapore, sharing their scaling up journeys. So see you soon, and thanks so much for joining. Thank you.
Thank you.